Morning, everybody. Can you hear me? It's a little difficult. I can't hear myself, so that's fine. So my name is Klemens. I'm a senior partner with McKinsey. I'm responsible for what we do in technology globally. So I live in Copenhagen, but I spend a lot of time flying around talking about technology and helping people with large technology transformations. So I often get this question kind of, what about technology? Where's the world going? And so on. And I will give you a very short introduction to this topic called Tech for Good. This started with an initiative that we have done together with the French president, who has now hosted kind of 2 summits 2 years in a row in Paris, where we are trying to build a common understanding between the political world and the big corporates around technology, what is actually happening, what is it that they collectively have to do, so we're going towards a better future. And as Macron tells people, there is no free lunch here. So this is going to require a lot of work and a lot of stamina to get through this in a good way. Technology has this amazing promise. We know for a fact now that technology has been a major contributor to GDP and welfare growth in our economies over the last 100 years. And when you look at the technology that is already available, not something that we have to invent, but kind of available commercial technology today, and you apply it onto the paid work that we have in the world, then it's very easy to paint a very nice picture around labor productivity. However, at the same time, we are also seeing some not so sustainable trends in societies all over the world, where people are actually not that comfortable with what is happening. People are questioning, is this a good thing? Is it a safe technology? And what about me? What about my job? What about my future? What about my children? What is my place in the world that we are going into? And people are beginning to understand that the changes that we will see from technology that have been amazing the last 15 years. If you just think about having this crowd here all mic'd up, how we live our lives, how we go to the doctor, how we interact, how we discuss politics, has changed completely in the last 15 years. The largest companies of the 10 most valuable companies in the world have changed completely in the last 10 years. And the changes that we are looking into are going to be much larger. So we're actually standing at a point in time where it is actually quite interesting what is happening. And it is easy to tell the story that kind of the benefits that we have already had are like amazing. We've had, over the last 100 years, our life expectancy is 50 years higher. Like 50 years higher life expectancy. Our richness is obviously completely kind of non-comparable. And also, for the individual that is participating in the workforce, the amount of work hours is systematically going down. So kind of you could look at this picture and said, the world is fantastic. It has become so much better, but still there is turmoil and people are not kind of happy, and that is because we have uncertainty. We can also, in the same picture that we are measuring kind of these fantastic benefits, then we can also see the inequality in societies all over the world is rising. In the US now, 50% of the income is going to the top 1%. And if you go down to the 1%, it's even bigger. We can measure systematically that people all over the world are feeling much more stress in their day-to-day lives, and that continues to increase. And trust in government is plummeting. This is a US number, kind of 90%, but if you've measured many countries in Europe, you have the same picture. And we sometimes, at least those of us that live in this particular part of the world, our world here is not as the rest of the world. It is a very, very specific kind of society that we are privileged to have here in Denmark. And people are worried. People are kind of deeply worried about what about my children? What about kind of, are they going to have as good a life as I've had? And we know now that almost 50% of people, they feel worried about, and they actually believe that their children are not going to have as good a life as they've had. And you can also, if you just look at the last 15 years in some economies, then it's up to 29 or 30% of people where you can statistically say they are actually having less money than their parents had. So this is a perceived problem, and in some economies it is already a very real problem. So is technology, is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? And that is not a kind of an easy answer. It is what we make it to be. Is advanced or kind of artificial intelligence, is that a technology that is going to make all of our cars safer? Or is it a virus that is going to spread into our industry and basically destroy it as we know it? The shared platforms that all of us have already used today, there's not probably a single person in this room that haven't already used one of these platforms today. It has given us significant benefits, but we are deeply worried what about kind of that is going to do to our society if we allow them to evolve as they have done so far. And robotics is a technology that has significant promises, but we also know we map these technologies up against our labor force down to 600 skill categories of work, and we know that there is an amazing displacement possibility if you use the technology just to displace jobs. So kind of, is it good or is it bad? It is completely up to us. If you just take kind of the potential in the health sector, and it is so easy to see the potential benefits here. We already have technology that can predict heart diseases from an EKG 5 years kind of on the future. We already know that a machine is much, much better at reading these diagrams than doctors. Not maybe the 80% that is easy to read, but the 20% that are more difficult to read. We also have technologies that are looking at cancer scans and are much, much better at dosing and identifying kind of where tumors are for very specific examples. And this is just at the very, very beginning. In many industries, we don't have had the data, and the technology to do this has been very difficult to use. So we are exactly at the point in time where we are democratizing all of this technology. Things that was actually very, very difficult to do in the course of the last few years is now all of a sudden easy to do and cheap to do. So this is happening very quickly. And you can also just look at kind of, we're already at 81 in longevity. We can get to, with technology, to 100 years. So kind of the promise there is fantastic. We also mapped the technologies up against our climate change. And here you have just as big of an impact. We know that with artificial intelligence, then we can steer temperature in buildings at 30 to 40% less power consumption without changing anything else than just the steering today. So the promise of what we can do here is very, very significant. If you look at kind of a combined picture of what technology has done to us in the past, and we start to measure welfare beyond GDP, then there's a lot of research that actually shows where welfare comes from. I mean, that is our social interactions with people, it is our leisure time, it is our health, it is our job security, it is our environment. So kind of there are factors that we can measure, and when we measure kind of how much has been kind of given to GDP and how much has been given on welfare, we know that kind of we have had a significant benefit. But we can also see that it's decreasing. So when we are looking into the future now, and this is something we should debate on the stage here later, then we have a few choices. We can use, on one axis here, we can use this technology to displace jobs. Being consultants, it is very easy to make the case of saying I can automate this job in the call center, I can automate this job in the restaurant, I can automate it all over the world. So we can choose whether we're actually going to use the technology to automate and displace, or we're going to use it to augment. How can we actually use technology to make the world better, create new jobs, innovate and so on? And that is just an investment decision for large companies and the public sector. On the other kind of axis, we can also choose how proactive are we going to be in this transition. Are we going to kind of be reactive, or are we going to be proactive? And proactive means we are going to educate our people up front. We are going to create technology investments into areas that go beyond GDP, that we actually go and we measure when we do our state budgets and so on, how much is our initiative going to mean for public health? How much is it going to mean for leisure time? How much is it going to mean for what people care about? And we have made an economic model, and this report is accessible on mckinsey.com/tech4good, that have modeled these scenarios. And the difference is very, very stark. And on the right side, you can see kind of the two, you can see extreme scenarios. There is a scenario that if you're looking into an area with low growth and kind of low proactive management of the transition, then we are seeing a relatively low GDP growth scenario, and we can see that all of the transition costs will eat up the welfare benefits. So kind of when you measure it up, they will basically get a neutral welfare benefit. It basically means that there will be too many people that are losing their jobs, there will be too many people that are worrying about the transition, and there's going to be too much turmoil. On the other hand, if we actually succeed in doing this well, we succeed in taking technology investments into augmenting jobs, into creating innovation, and we are proactively investing into the transition of our workforce, not just within the companies, not just within industries, but between industries. Then there is actually a scenario where we can get a significant uplift in the economic growth, and we can get a very significant welfare benefit from the transition. And I can't overemphasize much how much difference each of us and the world is going to kind of feel between these scenarios. It is quite a different world, also from a political turmoil landscape. So what is it that we need to do? We need to kind of balance the risks and the opportunities. So we need to kind of become very aware of what is the nature of the different technologies that we have. What technologies are actually the technologies that can go into the augmented scenario, into the innovation scenario. We need to become much, much more kind of technologically social responsible. So we need to put in assessments of different technologies and understand how are they actually going to impact us, and we need to become much, much more forward thinking around artificial intelligence. And I think kind of we are probably the only region in the world that actually has a chance to do that. In the West, we have a society that is much, much more kind of commercially driven. In the East, we have another kind of large society that is completely state-controlled kind of society. Our part of the world is the only one in this future that actually can put the human beings into the middle of it, and our policies, when we go into this future, need to model that. And then the last one, we call it decouple the short and the long term. And that is a call out to the politicians that this future needs to be managed up against a vision. So we actually need to have a relatively good future vision of where it is that we are going towards, because a lot of the actions that we do in the short term can only be determined by where it is that we want to go, but not by business cases that are kind of 6 months or 12 months old. But this lecture typically takes an hour, so kind of I think I cooked it down to my time frame.